Dune. It's been a minute since we were last in the Imperium. Glad to be back. You ever have one of those moments where you look at your desk? I've got an empty glass over here. I have half a cup of coffee over here. I just opened the soda over here. Hey, what is this? Blood orange, blood orange tangerine spindrift for the working man. Just one of those days. Last night was my game night, and I play in Daniel, aka Bandit Keeps home game, and we were talking after the game, and he was mentioned that he started reading through Dune, or no, he was listening to the audiobook of Dune, and I think we ended up getting on the discussion of playing in the universe of Dune or in the world of Dune, kind of as it is in the books, would seem very restrictive. The idea being, hey, Mark, the idea being that assuming you're following the movies, the newer movies or the older movies, or really the books, the the setting is pretty fixed. If you're playing on Arrakis, and we only get a hint of what Caladan is like, and maybe a little bit of Agidi Prime or the Harkonnens or Harkonnens, wherever you want to pronounce them. It's kind of, with the, if you were going to say playing on Arrakis, like where most of the book takes place, at least Dune Prime, I know they go further afield when you get into kind of God Emperor Dune, that sort of thing. But Dune Prime, and there isn't that much going on outside of the main storyline. And then it would be sort of, where do you fit in there? Would you play Harkonnen? And then what is your gig really if you're a Harkonnen? Just slaughter the Atreides and oppress the Fremen? I guess that's kind of it. The societies, at least the what you see in Dune on Arrakis, there's not much to it. They're not. I don't get the sense they're very fleshed out. Any of them, right? What do Atreides do for fun? What do they do when they're not working spice fields? What did they do before they left Caladan? I mean, it's kind of just assumed they just do kind of stuff, normal stuff, but you don't get a sense of what it feels like to live, say, just in Arrakeen, living your life. I mean, what do people who aren't spice harvesters do on Arrakis? If you're just kind of, I don't know, middle class, middle management, yeah, Atreides before the Harkonnen attacks, like, what do you do? I don't know. And of course, if you're playing after the attacks, then you're maybe even more limited to, basically, you could be a Fremen, in which case you're trying to overthrow the Harkonnen, but you're either going to be kind of Pendragon style, or you're sort of in the shadow of the what, Elgason, whatever. I forget what they call it, Muad'Dib, basically. You're in the shadow of Paul Muad'Dib, and you're doing that, or you're a smuggler. I guess you could be a third faction of smuggler, in which case you're just kind of trying to survive and scrounge together some spice, or you could be a Harkonnen, right? And it felt like, boy, that's really limiting. So I thought that what Modiphius did was really smart, as I've been thinking about it, which is to really expand the scope of things, to kind of like, here they'll have the whole Imperium, and even better than that is just make up your own part of the Imperium, make up your own kind of things, and then do that, which avoids or sidesteps a lot of the problems that you find. I know the One Ring people, I think some people really dislike, or it's very kind of mixed reaction to the setup in the One Ring, because you're in the Third Age, but you're kind of off to the side. You're in this sort of period, and things are happening, but you're not kind of a part of those things happening. So there's sort of your scope and kind of what you're doing is kind of limited to a certain amount of time in a certain little area. And I know there's a lot to do with, I think, with the Tolkien estate, there's even, I think, different licensing. Like, I know Amazon has the license to some things, but not actually, I think, the Silmarillion. So that kind of limits a lot of times when they make some decisions, not all of them, that were kind of goofy with Rings of Power. Some of it is because they can be in this sort of time period, but they can't touch certain things. There's a lot of weirdness going on with that. So I get it, but you feel kind of constrained, and you might feel that way in some respects if you're playing, I don't know, Conan. This used to be kind of a lot of open areas, but some other settings where it feels like everybody knows everything that's going on in the setting, and it's pretty constricted. So you don't have a lot of room to maneuver around in there. And even if you were going to play, I don't know, part of the Muad'Dib story, I guess, unless you were willing to take it apart and say, well, it might happen differently, or his plans might not succeed unless our plucky little group does something, which of course you could do. It can feel very, but it can feel very kind of like there's not a lot of room, and even just not a lot of enemies, not a lot of different goals, that kind of thing. But I felt like, man, create your own house, create your own kind of planet. You can put it wherever you want. You can be in kind of whatever time. So you don't have to be during the Muad'Dib era where everything might feel like it's focused on what's happening on Arrakis. You can be before, you can be afterwards. I thought that was really smart, I should say. I just wanted to say that because it kind of came up in conversation, and I don't know if I really mentioned it too much. Anywho, I believe my recollection, because like I said, it's been a minute, was that we were at threat. So that's where I'm going to start. Threat to me is interesting. I've been kind of digging meta currencies, at least of some sorts. I don't necessarily love tons of meta currencies, but I kind of like, or I think it's interesting to have one, especially if you can come up with kind of a reason for it existing, either for the GMs or for the players. But what I like about meta currencies like these, I think especially on the GM side, is they allow the players some measure of, I don't know if control is the right word, but basically, oftentimes things like threat are generated through player actions. Sometimes it's if you goof up too much on a roll, you get threat, which means that the players don't have direct control of it because you can goof up on a roll even if it's a really good roll. But of course, you're probably more likely to goof if you're doing something you're not good at, that kind of thing. But often you get it because you push a situation or you need something. Hey, I need a momentum, like in Dune. I need a momentum to do something, so I don't have one. Okay, I'll make an exchange. I'll do this thing I want, but then you get some threat. And now the player knows, because they kind of had a hand in giving it. Like they gave the GM this currency. When the GM uses it, one part of the nature of these currencies generally is to use it to make the the player characters' lives more difficult, I should say. It kind of becomes up. I think it can take away from the fact, or it can relieve a situation. Hey, Ian, it can relieve a situation where the players feel like they're unfairly targeted, or the GM's playing mean, or it's adversarial. Because it's like I didn't have this threat I'm putting in here is because you gave it to me. It's not me just doing it to be mean. Oh, I'm trying to stop you. It's like, no, if I have threat and I'm deploying it, it's because you guys gave me threat. So I kind of, I like that. And in some ways, I think it gives the players, whether it's real or not, because the GM can always do stuff and just not use threat and just like it's happening anyway. But at least it gives them this kind of appearance. Or if you're playing it straight, and I like to kind of play those things straight, I think there's enough stuff I generally don't feel like I need to put my finger on the scale at any point, but you have these kind of ways, and it means that the players can try to play aggressively, but then generate threat and live with it to try to get their goals, or they can try to play it conservatively and try to really starve the GM of threat. And of course, threat you'll probably have to take some at some points, and then that sort of shapes the game in interesting ways. And I like it. I like it. At least I think I like it. I like it for now. There's always going to be something where I'll go, I really don't like it, but I like it for now. All right, so let's read about threat. When you and the other players have momentum, the game master has threat. Threat works much the same as momentum, but for your opponents and enemies. Threat can be used for the same things as momentum, but the game master can also use threat to alter situations or the story in a few special ways. Threat represents perils, unforeseen dangers, and the potential for drama and excitement, and it rises and falls during play. In addition to this, if you're low on momentum, you can buy extra dice by adding to threat, essentially taking risks to get an advantage. Like I said, I think it's a neat system. I like the fact that this kind of threat and momentum are sort of two sides of the same coin, as they like to say. You and me, we're like two sides. We're not so different. We're like two sides of the same coin. Well, momentum and threat, they're kind of the two sides of the same coin, mirror images of each other. Okay, so then they're just repeating what they just said. So here we go. How does a referee, and I forget what did they call the referee something special here? They just call them game masters. Okay. How does a game master gain threat? Player characters can add to the threat pool in the following ways. They can buy D20s, they can suffer a complication, they can a game master might I suppose it says here, let's say at times the game master or the rules may state that a specific action or decision risks escalating the situation, making more dangerous and unpredictable. If a character performs an action that risks escalation, they immediately add 1 point of threat to the pool. So kind of something like, well, if you throw that grenade in that room, people are going to know you're here, or they're going to know that somebody's here. And the player's like, well, we need to clear out that room, so I'm chucking the grenade. Like, okay, I get a threat. Woohoo! The game master may add to threat in the following ways. Threatening circumstances. The environment or circumstances of a new scene may be threatening or perilous enough to warrant adding 1 or 2 points of threat to the pool automatically, which I think means something like there's a pit full of vipers or something, right? And so if you're down maneuvering around that pit of vipers, there's just extra threat there. Or maybe there's I don't know. This is where again, I would, it's nice to see examples, see what they mean, but that's the kind of thing that I envision, that there's something about the situation that is dangerous enough that there's that extra peril. Well, it's not just a pit; it's a pit full of snakes. So if you try to climb out of the pit and fail, normally that would just be, well, you fall on your butt, or maybe whatever. But if you fall on your butt and there's poison snakes at the bottom of the pit, well, that's a horse of a different color, kind of thing. Let's see. Similarly, some non-player characters may generate threat simply by arriving in response to changes in the situation or by taking certain actions. This also includes activities that escalate the tensions of the scene, such as non-player characters raising an alarm. So when the cop shows up and you're trying to do something shady, there's more threat there. And I imagine the idea would be that you as the game master, if then you were going to deploy threat in that scene, then you'd involve those environmental factors. So in the pit with the vipers, you would, if you had some threat and you decided to drop it in, and one thing to do would be the vipers as part of that, whatever that threat is. Similarly, if there's the police officers there and the player's going to try to pickpockets anyway, if you do then drop some threat in there, probably likely you would source it from the police officer or something else that makes sense in the context. And here's an example. Realizing the stakes have increased, Kara's player decides to shake off the intoxicated complication, adding 2 points of threat to the game master's pool. The game master also decides to add another point of threat to their pool, given that Marcus is now looking to either silence Kara or at least ensure she doesn't interfere. So in this case, there was a situation in the previous stream that we looked at where the player character was at this party and they were trying to broker a deal and they got it, but there was a complication that got them intoxicated. So now they were kind of suffering on future things they were doing after the deal was made because they were a little bit drunk. So the player decides to kind of buy off that complication, so she's not going to be intoxicated anymore. But now the game master decides, well, you could do that, but now there's going to be threat in other ways. And the GM decides that threat comes from this NPC Marcus and even adds another threat besides. And I believe, now someone can correct me, but I get the sense that it's meant to be fairly open, that this isn't black box behind the scenes thing, that in this conversation that the player and the GM is having, when the player says, hey, I want to shake off this condition, GM's going to go, great, but that gives going to give me 2 threat. And by the way, there's going to be, now I have a 3rd threat because this is also kind of happening. And I guess if you don't want to give the exact details because the player's not privy to it, just say that, okay, and there's another, and this has this situation, there's something else at play. But I imagine the threat is in some kind of almost, I could see it on a tabletop. I imagine in a VTT, I'd want it. I basically, what I'm saying is I'd want it to be pretty transparent. I'd want the players to see, like if I were playing at a tabletop, I would just have a bowl or some chips or something in front of me that shows exactly kind of how much threat I have, much as I would want the players to be kind of, I think they have a joint, I think momentum is a joint pool anyway, but anyway, I'd want them to kind of keep it. And so that, they can see, because part of that, like we talk about in OSR games, that idea of if you're going to make intelligent decisions, you kind of have to know have a good idea of what's out there. I think if you're going to make intelligent decisions, knowing that threat exists, I'd want to know. And I wouldn't want it to feel like the GM's just mysteriously, if I was if it was something I was counting in my head and suddenly I'm like, okay, the GM's got 3 threat, great. And suddenly the GM's gone over that. And the GM's like, excuse me. And then after the fact, the GM's like, well, I just gave myself 2 more. It's like, that's a little shady. But if the GM just says like, okay, well, this is the kind of the situation, let's just sort of give yourself a sit rep here. You're no longer intoxicated, but that, the danger has increased. And now, Marcus, this guy is suspicious or something else. So now he's, or he knows you're out to get him or whatever. He knows that the situation has deteriorated. So now there's more threat. I think that's how I would run it. I don't know if that's how it's intended because they don't really say, but in my mind, I think the flow seems to be that this would be kind of open information. Okay, so how do you spend threat? You can buy D20s, you can increase difficulty, you can, okay, that's for just kind of generic stuff. Non-player character threat spends. When a player character's action would normally add points to threat, a non-player character performing that same action or making the same choice must spend an equivalent number of points of threat. All right, when a player character's action would normally add points to threat, an NPC performing that same action or making that same choice must spend an equivalent number. I see. So let me see. So the NPC and the PC are at the bottom of the pit, are doing something in the bottom of that pit full of vipers. And if, I don't know, the player decides to splash blood on the ground, get the snakes all chums the bottom of the pit, getting the snakes all excited, and that would increase by 2 threat. I don't know why they would do that, but whatever. Then the NPC decides to chum also, that they would also have to spend threat. I mean, it would make more sense maybe if they were trying to climb out of the pit and that was going to enrage the vipers, maybe because as they climb off, like bits of the side of the wall come down and just start bonking annoying the vipers and causing them to get riled up. Then if the NPC also wanted to climb out of the pit, they would have to spend an equivalent number of threat, which kind of is, it's a little bit of there's like an inequality amongst the players and the NPCs in that way. Non-player character complications. If a non-player character suffers complication, the game master may buy off that complication by spending 2 points of threat. So basically, again, they can use it like momentum, but for NPCs. Traits, the game master may change, remove, or create a trait by spending 2 points of threat. This must come naturally from some part of the current situation. Environmental effects and narrative changes, the game master may trigger or cause problems with the scene or environment by spending threat. And then a rival house action, the game master may spend a threat point to introduce a known enemy house to the situation. It may be one of their agents simply taking an opportunity to attack the player characters, or it may turn out that they have an alliance with whomever the player characters are dealing with. Either way, the house makes an appearance in some way to complicate the situation for the player characters. And then the example is, as the situation is heating up, the game master decides to spend some of their threat. They decide that Marcus has a lot of friends at the party who have become irked at Kara's questioning. The game master spends a point of threat to add the environmental effect hostile room. Like, oh, hostile room. But, I think you get the idea. And I think that's cool. And like I said, I think it's cool. And I like the way that it's this conversation going back and forth with the players. And I feel like there's that little bit of course, you don't need any rules. You don't need many currencies to do any of this stuff. You could just do it, which is kind of what we do. I think playing any kind of OSR or kind of rules like game, you just do it. But I think a lot of people will find themselves more likely to do these things, which they should be doing, because the rules are sort of giving everybody that freedom to do it. They're putting that allowance out there for you as the GM. They're saying, hey, it's okay, it's good, it's actually required for you to do this. And for the players, it's telling them your game master is going to do this. They're not mad at you. This is part of their duties. And I think that can help alleviate some of the tensions and burdens of some of these things that can feel antagonistic. And sometimes GMs don't. Some people get a lot of fun. I mean, I know I do, throwing complications in there, like, oh, how could this possibly go wrong? Let me count the ways. Ha ha ha. Yeah, it's fun. But some people don't like to do it, feel bad. And that's, it's natural, I think, sometimes to feel bad. But at the same time, ultimately, you're not giving the players a part of, it's a roller coaster ride. And part of that roller coaster ride is those ups and downs. And you can't have those great ups if you don't have the downs, if you don't have the kind of the rise and the fall, right? That's all part of the deal. And if you flatten that out because you're you don't want to, you feel bad using the tools that they're giving you, in the end, you're kind of undermining the experience. Well, there's a fine line between that and being kind of a jerk too, obviously. But don't be a jerk. All right, determination. Determination is a special, scarce resource which you can spend on skill tests which align with your character's drives. It is earned when a character's drives impede or hinder their actions. You can spend determination before rolling to set a die so that it counts as having rolled a 1, or after rolling a die to re-roll an entire dice pool to create or destroy a trait, or create, destroy, or change a trait, or take an extra action in conflict. So if you have to work, if you're working with or against your drives, you can interact with determination. At the start of each adventure, you have a single point of determination for your character, but you may gain more during play. You may never have more than 3. All right, that makes sense. And then let's see. You can use determination. I think it's gonna be kind of. It seems like it's gonna be sort of maybe specific to an ability, but you can use determination to kind of roll an automatic one because we want to roll low. If I'm remembering correctly, so that's good. You can use reroll. You can create a new trait or change or remove an existing one. You can make, they call it a declaration. Or in combat, you could take an extra action. Let's see. Oh yeah, I think we did. Did I? I don't know if I'm trying to remember. Did I read through this last time? Well, anyway, it's a good refresher. If I'm repeating myself a little bit from last time, that's fine. I don't remember this part, so I'm gonna say that I'm not. Let's see. What is this? What is this bit about? Hold on, I just want to read this thing down here. Okay. If the statement would conflict, wait, what's the statement? Let's see. If the statement, I guess your drive statement, would conflict with the action, it may impair your character's judgment, make them biased, blind them to possibilities, or maybe that the action goes against your character's morals, spiritual drives, or sense of honor. The game master can offer you a point of determination to give you a choice, comply, or challenge. If you comply with your drive, then you immediately suffer a complication, which may often make the action harder or prevent you from even attempting the action. The character's drives are too strong to allow them to carry out this action freely, causing a problem. If you challenge your drive, then you may act freely, but you must cross out the drive statement. Oh, yeah, I think we did go over this part. So apologies if I'm going to this, but yes, I remember now. So it's kind of a neat thing. So you have these drives, right? The drives can be very helpful. They can hinder you. And if you kind of play within your drives, you're going to add complications, but sometimes you may need to, that's not, or you don't feel like that's an option. So you can get against your drive, but then you got to cross off that drive. Now, I remember that the thing I didn't like about it, not that I didn't like necessarily about it, but the thing that I was not such in favor of, or that's not even the right word. The thing that I was thinking was that would be more of a hefty sacrifice because I believe it's kind of like the scene ends and then your drive comes back. It's like a momentary lapse, whereas I thought it should be bigger than that, or I feel like it should be bigger than that. But of course I haven't run any Dune, I haven't played in any Dune, so I really don't know if what I'm suggesting for it being kind of a bigger deal to kind of cross off your drive should be bigger or whether it should be smaller. And I don't even now necessarily have a great sense of how long a scene is to know whether not having it for however long that scene takes is a big enough kind of deal. Because I wouldn't want to. It feels like a big deal to me. If you're like, I'm an honorable person, and then you're going to do something dishonorable, and I say, yeah, you're an honorable person. Do you want to do this or that? And you say, yeah, I'm gonna be dishonorable today. And it's like, okay, and then that scene ends and you just kind of get your honor back. It seems a little bit meh to me. I'd like it. Maybe the problem I'm having, I guess, is maybe the stakes aren't big enough in either case, so that what you're getting isn't enough to make it a big have to sacrifice. But I kind of like the idea that if you do that, then you sort of you can't just get it back. Oh, I'm honorable again. Like it's something bigger than that. But I might be asking too much of it. So we're into conflict. Conflict is inevitable in the Imperium. The interplay of wealth, power, influence, politics, greed, and ambition that forms most interactions between the houses of the Landsrad, Chome, the Imperial Court, the Spacing Guild, the Bene Gesserit, and other factions breeds strife and turmoil. All right, so I think are we talking about combat here or just things in general? Conflicts take many different forms and they can occur on many different scales. The following forms of common conflict are discussed in more detail in these rules, but new forms of conflict can easily be initiated with the general system. Interesting. So I wonder if this is kind of I'm getting the sense that maybe there's basically, instead of having systems that work differently, say combat from doing something else, some other kind of conflict, that they're all going to work kind of the same. In any case, we've got dueling, skirmishes, warfare, espionage, and intrigue. So the difference between intrigue and espionage is conflict relying on stealth and deception, and intrigue is social conflict where secrets and individual agendas are most prominent. That's interesting. I think we can. I think the ideas of what's the difference between dueling, skirmishes, and warfare is pretty um, clear. I would think. All right, I need a drink here. It is super hot again. Actually, you know what? It's not that it's hot. It's muggy. It's sticky. here in the city today. Okay, the basics of conflict. All conflicts have similarities at their core. Conflicts arise when two or more opposing parties have goals which are at odds with one another, and the conflict itself occurs as means to resolve that tension. Each side in the conflict has a collection of tools and resources, collectively referred to as assets, which they can employ. Isn't enough to merely have a tool, however, one must be able to wield it effectively, maneuvering their own assets to harm their opponents or protect themselves from their opponents' actions. This section describes the way that conflicts in Dune are similar. Later sections describe the specifics for how these common elements differ, often in just a narrative sense, in different types of conflict. So, right, in general, you've got assets. Your opponent has assets. When there's tension between you, and you're sort of on opposing sides, and you've come to a clash, you try to deploy your assets to affect your opponent and to protect yourself, and they're doing the same. So you can see how a lot of these different things can be seen as being similar. It's the sort of part of it. The differences maybe are what you're risking, like what's at stake in a duel. I guess the difference would be kind of what assets you can bring to bear, and then what's at stake, right? In a duel, your assets are mostly going to be your personal weapons, armor, whatever, and you're risking, your life or your freedom or something of that nature. In espionage, you might be risking um, discovery or a culpability or something of that nature. In return, you're looking, what you're trying to gain is intelligence, secrets, so on and so forth. Assets conflicts revolves around the use of assets. An asset is anything which a character possesses or controls, which they can use to protect themselves, overcome others, or otherwise achieve their goals. Each asset is useful in different circumstances and can be used in a variety of ways. A company of house troops can be used during warfare to attack and defend, but they can also be used as guards to prevent infiltration during espionage or in a parade to honor or awe a guest during negotiations or intrigue. So one asset, house troops, can be used in different ways. Again, I think given that the conversational nature of this and really all RPGs, right, is if you can figure out a way that makes sense for an asset to be used, I would imagine that they'll be okay to use it. In a duel, could you use your house troops? Maybe, but there might be a big risk there. Well, that's not really. I mean, we're looking about a formal duel, like at the end of the Dune movies, where Paul Atreides and Fade Routha have a one-on-one duel. It's probably would be they could Paul could use his asset of say the Fade Akin or the Fremen warriors to do something, and just as much as probably Fade could use the Emperor Sardaukar something else to do something, but doing that would have given the nature of it would probably be um, what's the word I'm looking for? Probably not be beneficial, right? But you could potentially use it, but it's there. But then another thing like your ornithopter, in some cases, would be a very useful asset. The ornithopter is not going to help you at all, and there'd probably be no way of convincing somebody that, oh yeah, my ornithopter that's parked outside in the parking lot is going to help me in this duel in the throne room with Fade. Assets by themselves are by themselves a form of trait. Those specific assets may have additional rules associated with them in some contexts, such as to describe the destructive interaction between a lasgun and a shield. Each asset also notes the type or types of conflict they are most suited for. This is not a restriction so much as a prompt. Using an asset in an unconventional way in a type of conflict it isn't normally used for might be a winning strategy, but that sort of creativity is left to the game master to resolve. Right. So if you could figure out a way to lure Fade out to the parking lot and hit the remote control button on the las guns on your ornithopter, maybe that would be something you could do. Okay, so basically two forms of assets: a tangible asset or an intangible asset. Assets also have a quality, which is a rating from 0 to 4. Let's read the example. Caro Mollet has 3 personal assets: a concealable knife, a personal ornithopter, and some as of yet undetermined blackmail evidence. The knife and ornithopter are tangible assets, and the blackmail evidence is intangible. They are all quality 0, but any of them might be upgraded with more study, honing, or skill. These are just her most useful possessions, though. She has access to all manner of other specialized equipment her house can provide, and as for normal items, no one in the Imperium is ever very far away from a knife. Give the hawk coated a blade. All right, zones of conflict. When a conflict begins, the game master defines the area within which the conflict takes place. This may be a physical area or an abstract representation of the conflict, but in either case, it is divided into distinct zones. within which characters can move and use their assets. Zones can be any shape, any size or shape. A contest between two merchants might use two zones, each being a whole planet. A fight between some assassins in an alley might be a single zone, or even 6 different zones denoting different parts of the alley. So I guess you can. What was it? It was. I forget the game. Was it the? Oh shoot! There was that kind of Tintin inspired game we looked at a while ago. Had that neat. It had a really cool concept for splitting combat areas into zones, and I feel like this is kind of in a similar sort of thing. But I think the key is, as the game master, you're going to have the ability to determine how many zones make sense. There's no size, so it's just all a matter of context. If you're assassins, say if they are ninjas, you might want to have multiple zones in an alleyway representing vertical height and the horizontal floor, because they might be climbing up the walls and doing other stuff, or maybe they can fly, right? So it might make sense to have it more of a three-dimensional kind of space of zones. Whereas if they're just two guys in, running like a cop and a robber just kind of running through an alley, maybe just one zone that's the floor of the alley makes the most sense. But of course, it can be planets, it can be anything. It's just whatever the nature of the conflict is probably going to help determine somewhat about what the zones, or at least give you an idea of what the zones should be. How these zones relate to one another. Okay, I think that's makes sense. I'm just kind of breezing through a little bit. All right, I think I get the concept of the zones. Action order: during a conflict, characters perform actions in a specific order. Each character takes a turn during which they may take an action. Once each character in a round has taken action, once each character in the conflict has taken a turn, a single round is completed. Right, so everyone gets every round. Combat or conflicts take place in rounds. Each participant gets one turn, and when all their turns have been completed, that concludes one round, and then rinse and repeat until you're finished. At the start of the first round, the game master selects which character takes the first turn. This is normally a player character unless there is a compelling narrative reason for a non-player character to take the first turn, or the game master spends 2 points for it. Once a character has finished their turn, they may do one of the following: either allow an opposing side to choose someone to act next, or spend 2 points of momentum, or add 2 to the threat to keep the initiative. Let's see. If they keep the initiative, then that character may take an extra action immediately, adding +1 difficulty to any test they attempt, or allow an allied character to take a turn before handing over to an opposing side. So that's kind of a neat thing, right? You either have to let the opposing side go, or you can spend some resource or give the other side some resource to hold on the initiative yourself, or hand it off to an ally. So you get a little choice. Each time a new character is chosen to act, the character chosen must be someone who has not yet taken a turn during the combat round. If there are no characters left on the side who haven't yet taken a turn, that side must pass and immediately nominate another opposing side. If only one side has characters remain to act, then they each take a turn in sequence until all the characters taking a turn. All right, let's read this example. Kara and her friend Nasir are set upon by 2 assassins. As it is an ambush, the assassins start with the initiative. One of them makes an attack, and then the initiative passes to Kara and Nasir. The players decide Kara should be the one to act, and after she attacks, the initiative passes to the assassins. One assassin has already acted, so the other one must be the one to take a turn this time. However, before passing the initiative over, Kara and Nasir spend momentum to keep the initiative. This allows Nasir to make an attack, but if they cannot fell the assassins, the remaining one can still take a turn before the round ends. Okay, makes sense. I think so. All right, so I'm kind of breeze through the actions. So you can move, you can use an asset, which basically, you can, let's see. So common ways to use an asset, right? Attacking an opponent, attempt to remove an opponent's asset from play, attempting to create a new trait for the scene, attempting to overcome an obstacle, attempting to gain information about the scene, attempting to remove a trait or similar complication. I think those all sound pretty good. I mean, it's combat more or less, right? Here's the overview. Here's a high-level summary of how to make an attack. Choose an asset to use in the attack. Based on the type of attack you are making, choose an appropriate skill and drive, as well as a focus. Roll your contest against the target. If you win the contest, your attack is successful. If you lose the contest, your attack fails. On a successful attack, the outcome depends on your target. If your foe is a minor character, they are defeated. Otherwise, defeating the foe is an extended task with a requirement equal to the foe's most appropriate skill. right? So basically, if it's a mook, they're going to go down fast. And this is just generic. Yes, they're using attack because you are doing something antagonistic towards them, but this doesn't have to be combat. It could be, like I said, espionage. It could be intrigue. It could be kind of a bunch of different things. But if your foe is not of a certain, is not a is just a minor character, then you only got to kind of get them once with something. Uh, Hi, Emily. Okay. Attack, defeat, and recovery. Common choice in conflicts. Characters may attempt to defeat their opponents in order to remove those opponents from the conflict. Any action where the goal is to defeat an opponent is classified as an attack, and defeated opponents are no longer able to participate in the conflict. They may be injured or even dead. They may have been forced out of a social gathering, or they're otherwise incapable of continuing to affect conflict. What's good, Emily? Oh, it's Friday. Friday is always pretty good. And then let's see, contest results. If you win, then you successfully attack the enemy. If you lose, all right, I think we kind of get it. I'm doing good, Emily. Emily, I hope you're having a good Friday as well. If you want to inflict a lasting injury on an opponent, spend 2 points of momentum after the attack, which defeats that opponent. All right, and now, so that's so there is defensive assets. Attacker, let's see. I'm going to kind of slide over this. Ooh, what is resisting defeat? I shall resist defeat. Some characters are harder to overcome than others, possessing a limited ability to fend off the attacks, literal or figurative, that would lay them low. This kind of desperate last-ditch survival cannot be achieved often, and it always comes at a price. Something lost, something suffered, or some advantage given to the enemy. All player characters have this option, as do all notable and major non-player characters and all notable supporting characters. Emily, I usually stream most weekdays, I suppose, unless those things come up here and there. What if I don't have an asset? Well, then too bad. But I think we get the idea of the conflicts. It's pretty much using the same system. Like, right? I think that's the kind of thing with a lot of modern systems. It's not what we're used to in a sense from D&D, which has a lot of discrete systems. But here we have kind of a unified system. I know some people like the discrete systems. What I like about the unified system, I just think it's an easy teach, because you just kind of teach how something works, and then everything is able to just kind of build off of that one system. But there is a certain quirky charm, I think, to having a bunch of different subsystems. So it does make things more complicated. Appreciate it, Emily. Have a great weekend. Forms of conflict. Dueling. All right, zones and dueling, you're maneuvering, you're positioning. Ooh, look at that. So we got some little graphic here of guard, target, guard, target. Nice. So dueling is single combat. An example, Kara is doing some combat training with Nasir. As it is a one-on-one, one against one, this is a duel. So the zones are defined as the standard personal zone and 2 defensive zones each. I guess that the personal zone and then 2 defensive zones. Let me just see. I guess I do want to read about. I was going to skip over, but now I'm like, I kind of want to read about this. Dueling is a single combat between 2 individuals. As such, the physical environment matters somewhat less than positioning of the combatants. Thus, each character receives a single zone, which represents themselves, and 2 zones that represent an area immediately around them, which can be thought of as their guard. One to the left and one to the right, with one fighter's right guard zone connecting to the other opponent's left guard zone. Emily, I appreciate it. I get a lot of artists that come in. If you want to contact me, off stream, I'm not looking for any art right now, but feel free. Okay. Thus, each character. Okay, so we got the zones. Let's see. And they may reflect high or low. Okay, that's fine. Each combatant is assumed to turn to face their opponent at all times. I don't know why you make that assumption. Both combatants' assets begin the battle within their own zone, and battle is a matter of moving assets into positions to attack and defend effectively. Moving a weapon asset into the opponent's central zone and making a successful attack typically results in the target's defeat. So if you can get your asset, I guess a weapon, a blade, in there, then you can do it. Hey, Avigamus. No worries. I've been lax in my Dune duties. So I think this is the first day this week. I think I'm back on Dune. But yeah, glad you made it. Glad you made it for a stretch. Happy Friday. Okay. So how does one get? So you have these two guard zones and then your target zone. How does that work? How do I get my melee weapon into your target zone? I'll say melee weapons are the most common form of dueling asset. Blades varying in size from swords and daggers and knives. Okay, that's great. A melee weapon may attack an opponent once it has been moved into that opponent's zone. Oh, nice. Glad you're able to catch up. Subtle weapons are essentially a specialized form of melee weapon designed for trickery and deception rather than honest battle. Tiny needles, nearly invisible, always envenomed, often embedded in clothes, can nick or scratch unwary foes with innocuous movements. Concealed blades can be drawn to provide a sudden advantage. Poison and drug dispensers. All right, this is all good. It's all Dune stuff. I'm really just curious about how you get through the zones thing. Moving a weapon asset into the opponent's central zone. Right, but how do you get? I still don't know how those guard zones work. Example, Kara and Nasir are both using knife assets, but to give Nasir a chance, he's wearing a shield and holding a knife in each hand. Kara only has a single blade. Okay, but that doesn't tell me. It's on the next page with the actions. Okay. Action. So we have assets. Oh, so movement. Any asset worn your character's person. Okay. Is placed in the zone that it represents your character. Right. That's fine. Any asset mounted upon one of your character's arms or held in one of their hands begins in one of the zones immediately in front of them. So I guess it's in one of those. So your knife would be in a guard zone. That makes sense. Let's see. If you don't have a weapon, you end up with an unarmed attack asset. That's fine. Intangible assets. All right. Moving an asset boldly in the form of misdirection. All right. Okay. Let's see. Let's see the example here. Kara and Nasir both begin circling each other. Nasir cannot move his shield asset, but can move either or both knives in intent to get an attack on Kara. He tries to keep one knife on the offensive, moving it into Kara's defensive zone. Moving it into Kara's defensive zone, but keeps one knife back in his defensive zone to parry with. He uses a lot of subtle moves in case he can get in the right place to make an attack. All right. I still like to see, is they're going to do one where they're rolling, but they're just kind of getting, or I guess there's more to it. Kara makes a lot of bold moves, taking her blade close to Nasir's personal zone and giving her the option of moving his defensive knife out of the way by dodging and weaving to find a gap in the guard. Ooh, okay. I'm still not sure I totally get it. So it's like your weapons are in here, and then you can make actions to try to, I guess you got to use actions and just things, move those maneuvers, aka boldly subtle moves to try to get something through that space. Bam, into there. I think is what it is. So for attacks, dueling, a dueling asset. Okay, I'm not going to go through the attack because we read that in the generic sequence. You can also target assets. So if you're wondering, I guess, if you could disarm somebody, the answer is yes. Okay, Kara manages to attack one of Nasir's blade assets, sending it spinning across the training floor out of reach. Nasir fails to bring his other blade back for defense, and Kara presses her advantage, subtly moving her blade into Nasir's personal zone. She keeps the initiative to make an attack, but the shield asset increases the difficulty by 1. She succeeds, defeating Nasir by sliding a slow blade under his throat. So she was able to attack his asset, which then basically, if we go back up here, he had an asset here and an asset here. Let's just say she went this way. She was able to get that out of the way, which opened up there for her to push in. So I guess when you have these zones, right, you got to try to defeat each zone. So before you can get to this target area, which is your ultimate objective, in a sense, if you looked at it if you looked at these, I think the reason that I was having trouble with this was I was looking at it like people, when really it's almost, in a sense, it is people. In this case, it is their kind of anatomy in a way, but it's like you have to move your thing into there. So you have to come in here. Now this thing is a guard. It has something in here, potentially, maybe not. Assuming that it does, you have to be able to do something to get this defense. In this case, she disarms him. Pew, that defense is gone. And then so that he doesn't have a chance to redo some other defense, like flip the knife to the other hand or do something like that, then she grabbed the initiative or kept the initiative, and then like bam. So she kind of had to make, in a way, there was what would you call it, like a metaphorical kind of move, in terms of her offense going from bam, ba bam, ba bam, in there. I think that's right. I think I've got it. Abigamus says, basically, you take an action, make a check to move an asset. Narrative, it's maneuvering your stance in position to get an opening on your opponent. So your knife, you have to move it through your opponent's guard, then take their target zone to strike. Okay, yeah, I think I got that. That's pretty cool. And remember, that's for dueling. That's for kind of one-on-one battles. That is your, Paul Muad'Dib versus Fade Routha. So it kind of makes sense to drill down a little bit into something like that. I don't think. I think if it was just kind of a mass combat with 8 Atreides and Fremen versus 12 Harkonnens, that would be a skirmish or something else. But it was kind of good to go through that, and thank you, Avid Gamers, for helping me work through that. Avid Gamers also says moving boldly lets you spend momentum to move multiple assets or extra spaces, while moving subtly controls the board, moving back your opponent's assets. Cool. I definitely feel like watching an example or kind of playing through that would also help. I think that would be somewhere where when I was, if I was teaching this, if I ever got somewhere where I want to teach that, I definitely would want to maybe run a mock combat, or maybe when I kind of a combat came out, the first combat, want to kind of walk through it slowly. I mean, or duel or whatever it happens to be. And then we have skirmish. So then basically there's kind of versions of these for each of the kinds of combats. So we went through dueling. I'm not going to go through skirmishing. I think it's going to be, with differences, but also kind of similar. Same thing with espionage zones. In espionage, are going to be social groups and secure places. So we have an example here. A spice smuggler, which is a person, runs a smuggling operation, which is a group, who trades with a Fremen, which is also a group, who lives on Arrakis, which is also a place. So those zones are the groups and the places. So the smuggling operation is a zone, Fremen are a zone, Arrakis is a zone. Like I said, I like these. I like these unified systems that give you some room, because remember that we just went through dueling, and it's not exactly the same, but it's using the same framework, just with a little bit of additional things to it. I like it. It definitely would take me some getting used to, but I do like it. We got warfare. I declare war. So zones in warfare are maneuver and terrain. Do we get a little pithy chart? We do not. And assets are things like armed forces and fortifications. Assets in a espionage are spies and security. Right? That makes sense. Spies, offense, security, defense. And then intrigue. Physical environments. It may be useful in some social scenes to think about the physical environment rather than the social connections. You may be describing a social gathering, such as a party, a diplomatic conference, or something similar. These function in much the same ways. Did I find a typo? This might be my first typo find. These function in much the same way, not was, same way as environments described in the skirmish section, though they are typically more comfortable. Yes, I can imagine that the cocktail party will be a little bit more comfortable than the battleground. That makes sense. Let's see. Characters can move between these zones freely, though there may be locked doors or guards barring access to some areas. And unless you are deliberately trying to be discreet, any character in the same zone as you can hear the conversations you have. This does mean that finding a quiet, isolated place to have a private conversation can be important. So basically, in intrigue, the physical spaces can have meaning. And they're talking about basically the zones here, personal and political connections, but they're also saying, hey, don't forget about the physical spaces, because that can have bearing. Some modifiers for the disposition of different folk, if they're allied, friendly, neutral, unfriendly, or opposed. Pretty much your kind of reaction roll type deal. Assets are trades and secrets. Ooh, what are these guys doing in this cave? Seeing a nice picture of this. Oh, something's gonna go down in this. Is that a siege? Oh, that's like the what do they call the water? The water reserves, the Fremen water reserves. Is there a name for it? I'm sure there is, but I can't remember. I think of the David Lynch Dune. Like this is one of their what is like their water catches. Only a few of us know them all. The advent, okay, assets. The advent of the field process shield and the lasgun with their explosive interaction, deadly to attacker and attacked, place the current determinatives on weapons technology. We need not go into the special role of atomics. The fact that any family in my empire could so deploy its atomics as to destroy the planetary bases of 50 or more other families causes some nervousness, true. But all of us possess precautionary plans for devastating retaliation. Guild and Landsrad contain the keys which hold this force in check. No, my concern goes to the development of humans as special weapons. Here is a virtually unlimited field which a few powers are developing. This is from Muad'Dib's lecture to the War College from the Stilgar Chronicle. Ah, the Stilgar Chronicle. Ah, thank you, Avid Gamers. Yes, we have thousands such caches, but only a few of us know them all. I have to say, I know the Dune, and I've said this before, the Lynch Dune movies, horribly flawed, deeply flawed, but man, I do love it. And just a little shout out to David Lynch, who I guess is suffering from emphysema, so he can't. There's something about a note about he has his emphysema and he can't direct in person anymore. And I don't know if that's a permanent change or just because he's suffering right now. But get better, David Lynch, amazing artiste. Tools and resources. I think I'm gonna breeze past here. Let me know if any of these assets are really worth. I mean, I think we get the idea of what they are, and I don't think I need to go through them in detail. I think we get the idea. This is your inventory, though. I really like the idea of looking at all of your resources. So I guess what I will say about the assets, structuring everything as assets, is a nice way of looking kind of holistically, if you will, at all of your resources. So it's not just what you have on your person. And I think it's a really clever way to just look at things because there's those jokes about someone being like, I'm I'm cash poor kind of thing, right? You're like, but what does that mean? It means that you might have other types of wealth, but it's not it's not currently in your wallet or purse. And by the same token, I think when you look at this, you can have this kind of this broader view of an inventory of what you've got. And I think in a lot of games that would be useful because I think they're not managed by having it all in the term of assets. Like, and assets can be those intangible ones. Like, oh, we know we've got dirt on somebody. We have these guys are our allies. These things, you kind of have them all. You can sort of quantify them a bit, what their value is, and then by looking at them like that, it really puts things into focus. Whereas oftentimes in the game, it's like, oh, I have a note somewhere in the log that the Duke owes us a favor, but I didn't write it. This is part of my inventory. Right, sword, shield, armor, favor from the Duke. Right, that stuff kind of should be there, so you remember it, you keep it in mind. It's that part of that inventory of stuff. No, I can't go to the magic item shop and spend that necessarily, but it's still kind of valuable to me. So I really like the idea of like just have all these resources, have all these assets, kind of keep them down there, and then they can constantly be things that you're thinking about. And how can you're thinking about, and part of that, I think it also just it helps with that sort of clever play concept. If I have these unusual things, if I'm in a situation, I might look at something and say like, geez, I'm stuck, but I've got this favor the Duke, and maybe it doesn't make sense, but then I'm thinking about it like, oh, maybe I can make it make sense. Maybe I can find a way to leverage the Duke's favor to do something. And I really dig it. I dig it. So we're just going through assets. We're going through assets. This is grand. What does the game master do? Nothing. Be a team player. Create and manage the campaign. Keep the game enjoyable and have fun. It is not their job to quote unquote beat the player characters or make everything too easy. Well, there you go. I don't think you're gonna find too many people arguing with that. And keep the game enjoyable. This is the one that if I was going to say, I'm on the record as saying I do not believe that the GM is like the dancing monkey there to make everybody have a good time at the. I mean, it is balanced by the fact that okay, you're supposed to make the game fun, but also have fun, which can be it can seem like, well, it's the same thing, or it can also not be. I think that if you're playing a game that's fun and everybody's on the same page, then that's fun. I don't have to do anything more than just kind of play the game honestly and in good faith. I don't have to do extras. Right. That will all kind of take care of itself because the game is fun. That's my personal take. But I think ultimately, like, that's not bad things to keep in mind at all. Quick tips, flexibility is key. Very true. Not everyone's the kwisatz haderach. Also very true. Well, let's see what they say about this. So, not everyone's the quiz is the kwisatz haderach, but a player might want to experience what it's like to be the chosen one every now and then. It's nice to make players feel extra special on occasion. Remember, they're on your storytelling team, not your nemesis. Yes, that's probably a good point. And it is fine for them to feel special. Maybe you can have a campaign where the one was not Muad'Dib, that it happened somewhere else. Neo in the Matrix. Don't demand improvisation from your players. That's probably a good point too. I always feel like, if what I want from my players, right? Because this is a big thing. It gets that core of that argument that comes up with, well, it's my character. What does my character do? My character is a 19 intelligence mage, and I'm only intelligence 10. So whatever. It's like, I don't need to know, or I'm playing a bard who's an expert at the lute, but I don't know how to play any instruments. So what? Right? I don't. That's not what I want. Right? It's fine if you want to make up a song, a limerick or something, and do a little ditty for your bard. Hey, great. That's fun, and it. Not to say it doesn't add to the game. Of course it does. At the same time, what I want is, I want to know what your goal is and what your strategy or tactic for getting to that goal is. To me, it's not enough to just say, like, well, my bard plays a song to convince the king to help us. It's like, well, like, what are they doing? You don't need to write me a song. You don't need to tell me, but I want to hear something like, my knowing that the king has an attachment to their, the kings that came before them. I sing a song that celebrates a king of their line a few centuries ago who was brave and fought a big battle and won against the tall odds. And I'm doing that because I want him to through that story, put himself in that king's shoes and to be brave like that king was brave. And that means would help us, because what we're asking the king to do is to be brave. Right? Perfect. That's what I want. Right? It tells me what your goal is, and it tells me your angle for getting there. And no, you didn't need to write a song or role play out the song or any of that, but I needed that part. That's, to me, is like, that's getting into the role playing part. You're in the role, you're figuring out, this is what I need to do, and when I need to do it. And for me anyway, if you can't do that, then I'm not doing it for you. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not. That to me is the game kind of thing for me. That's how I feel anyway. And if that's kind of beyond a particular player, they can't do it, then I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just, I probably wouldn't be the right table for them then, I suppose. Oh yeah, and also everybody panics, game masters especially. Yep, absolutely true. So you can have a section here on long games versus, or sorry, short games versus longer term campaign, or long term campaigns. That's good. Picking out the scope. Are you local? Is it over a world? Is it over the galaxy? A galaxy. And then how long is it? Is it a one shot? Is it a 3-chapter arc? Is it a 9-chapter arc? These are all good things to kind of keep in mind or ponder anyway. On to creating an adventure. All right. So I don't, what is a published campaign versus creating your own campaign? I don't think we need to read that. We can roll a story hook. So we haven't seen, I mean, obviously we're now just getting into the game master. So we haven't seen a bunch of tables and things, or like roll on tables kind of things. So let's see, what kind of plots can we get here? If we needed to roll a story hook, we could have roll your d20 up for each column. All right. So yeah, investigate the murder or destruction of the dot dot dot. Cause the murder or destruction of the dot dot dot, or rescue or recover the dot dot dot. And the goal could be secret data, a house, minor heir, an artifact, some illegal tech, or secret spice stores. The location could be a warehouse, a manor house, a siege, smuggler's base, or the desert. The hazard could be Sardaukar soldiers, security systems, the desert, the Spacing Guild, or the smugglers. Let's see. And a character could be Bashira, the head of the house miner security, Kaunos, the merchant, Anka, the Fremen stillsuit seller. Got to get your stillsuit, and hopefully you know how to seal it up desert style. He will know our ways like they're his own. Could it be the one? Hegai, the smuggler, and Akira, the ornithopter pilot. All right, that's kind of Arrakis based, but that's cool. So we have some quick tips. You can create non-player characters, create locations, and some variety. We have a sample villain, Malthace Ferreira. Who? Malthace Ferreira, a noble who leads the house minor on Arrakis. A house minor on Arrakis. What? She wants to secure a Chom directorship for her house. When? She has been patient for many years and is making her big move now. Where? She lives and works on Arrakis, but hopes to receive a Siridar. Hold on a minute. Where's my? Do I need to zoom in here? My glasses are actually right in front of me. What is that? A Siridar? Let's see. Where did I see Siridar? Okay, well, hold on. So where she lives and works in Arrakis, hopes. Oh, there it is. Hopes to receive a Siridar fief from the Emperor along with her Chom directorship. I'm not sure what a Siridar fief is, but I'm guessing it's not on Arrakis. Why? Her family has never had much influence due to their status as a powerless house minor on Arrakis. They were always expected to support whoever had the planetary governorship. And Malthace has seen how every duke and baron who ran the Siridar fiefdom, or is that maybe on Dune? She's looking for the Dune? I don't know. I'm not sure. I still don't know I'm still not sure what Siridar is. Who ran the Siridar fiefdom has botched their command. She knows that she and her family can do a much better job. It sounds like she wants, I guess, Dune. She wants Arrakis. Is Arrakis called the Siridar fiefdom? Is that, I don't know. And how she can do it? Malthace believes she's made a deal with a Chom representative. The massive mercantile organization is unhappy with the shares of melange they're receiving from the current planetary governor. If Malthace can find a way to ruin the reputation of the great house currently running Arrakis, her Chom contact believes that they can have the house exiled and transfer their directorship to Malthace's house. Okay, so yes, she is trying to get Dune. That's a bold play, Cotton. Okay, so here they're getting more Dune centric, or I should say Arrakis centric, which is fine. Arrakis awaits, though I kind of like the idea of going somewhere totally different. Oh gosh, I just drank my coffee. That's a weird. I just happen to have placed my soda can behind the coffee and just picked up the coffee. Still tastes all right. It's a weird combination. Let's see. Find a group. All right, that's all fine. Running the game, the first scene. I don't know that I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I'm sure their advice is good. I'll just read these. So, some tips for creating characters with your players: work together, create imperfect characters, allow unbalanced groups, think about character death, foster diversity, plant story seeds, and ask what the players want. Those are all good. Think about character death's a good one. I don't think that necessarily gets talked about enough. I know we often will put some kind of thing like, "Hey, make sure your players know they can die, their characters can die," but really just talking it out, I think, is a good idea. Okay, so we're going back kind of through the rules, which is fine. I'm going to zoom out here because, like I said, I don't think TPK. So, troubleshooting, adjust power levels on the fly, keep the game moving, anticipate wily players, and TPK. I'm guessing, I'm not sure what they're saying about that. And then we have some box text on managing personalities, dealing with the rules, handling disengagement, reducing distractions, and integrating loners. All good stuff. And we get some consent and comfort levels, also important. Comfort and consent, mitigating player abuse, checking in with players, and the OK check in. And then using some different kind of safety tools like a safe word or I don't know, this says color check in or stoplight method. I'm not sure what those are, but I'm guessing it's kind of another safety tool. And now we have some notes about creating games in the Dune universe. Remember, they had this idea of they're saying moving between architects and agents. Agents is playing sort of ground level, where architects are playing more the I guess the more political game. Evoking the power of faith. Oh, that's probably a good note to have. That's another thing I'd like to do better in games is really integrate more with the religious side of it. I mean, you're in these universes like in talking, fantasy kind of games where they're active gods doing stuff, but oftentimes games don't really, other than clerics kind of praying and the evil high priests rolling up every once in a while. You don't really get too much of the fact, unless that's what your whole game is about. Then it just becomes that tropey, like we have to kill a god or a new god is born, or we're gonna be a new god, which that stuff actually does not. Maybe just because of Dragonlance. I don't know. That doesn't interest me too much. No offense. If it's your jam, hey, it's your jam. So we got some notes here on Evoco. I say we had evoking the power of faith. It was good, portraying the galactic scale, the challenges of technology, working with prophecy, prescience, and hyper perception. Ooh, that might be a good one. Hold on. Oops. No, I want to move. So the problem of prescience. Even Muad'Dib himself doubts his divinity and is often paralyzed by his own vision of a future he cannot accept, but simultaneously feels powerless to avert. This is the limit and danger of prophecy. The patterns of possibility open before one. To reach a desired future one must cleave to a rigid path, but also be ever aware of the cresting waveform of the present, always adjusting to the minutiae of circumstance or risk falling off the path and into unintended chaos. The power of prophecy thus limits personal freedom, and the path to the future can quickly become a trap to which one must willingly fall victim or risk arriving at an unknown and potentially undesired destination. This is further complicated by the more practical and subtle uses of prescience as a method of surveillance. As most extreme, seeing prescient patterns and outcomes can mean an almost omniscient ability to see and foresee the actions of allies and enemies alike. This is particularly dangerous if these powers are closely held secret, as the best defenses against prescience require foreknowledge of such a capability. And then avoiding prescience. As a game master, you should understand how such capabilities will distort the outcome of events in a story and how both player characters and non-player characters alike will react to such capabilities. While certain means of avoiding prescience, the presence of guild navigators or later technologies such as no chambers, will eventually partly counter it, the most reliable method of countering prophetic power will be the active machinations of other prescient beings. It is often difficult for prescient beings to see and predict outcomes that directly involve the actions of others with this ability. Somehow, their ability to observe and interpret the patterns of the future are either themselves variables outside the larger pattern or threads within the pattern too subtle for all but the most talented prescient beings to perceive. And I think there was something else that would come up where like Paul would enter these spots where he couldn't see, like there was some big choice coming and he would be in the dark. He wouldn't be able to lean on his prescience. And you can't do that all the time in the game, but you can have some kind of key moments where it just, you can't see. You're in this kind of, I don't know, like your fluctuation point or something where it's just, you got to just do. You got to do what you got to do. Hyper perception and expanded consciousness, and then game mastering superhumans. And we get another. Now we have another chapter on allies and adversaries. I'm gonna kind of scroll through this pretty quickly. We get some, you get to. So we're going through. I guess we're gonna get some of the major houses and some characters, but I'm not gonna spend time on them. I don't think it's necessary. If you like this and you buy it, then you can read all this about. You can read all about Gurney Halleck's drives and skills, and what is that instrument he plays? Ah, Thufir. He may be old, but he's still one of the finest mentats in the galaxy. Duncan Idaho. What was the whole God? Was it like that obsession with Duncan Idaho? Yeah, he was like Duncan Idaho, man through time. He's really the star of those Dune books. He keeps showing up. What do people love so much about? Every game is thank you, the battle set. What do people love so much about Duncan Idaho that they keep wanting to bring him back? I know there's something because he has an emotional. I guess it has to do with, if I'm remembering correctly, really fuzzy here, that the Tleilaxu and people are trying to I think they're trying to assassinate Leto, and they know he has a sort of emotional connection to Duncan Idaho, so it makes sense to bring him back. But still, it's kind of like, why does Duncan Idaho get to keep returning over and over and over again? How many Duncan Idahos do we need? All right, Shaddam the Fourth, Princess Irulan, yeah, Fremen. I got you. Chani. I am Chani, daughter of Liet, and I will not have let you hurt my tribe. Let's see. Oh, we do have some notes about creating non-player characters. Hey, make them believable. Manage diversity. Don't let them take over the adventure. That's a big one. Don't let them take over. Don't let them take over the adventure. Don't turn them into the DMPC. And don't cross the line. I don't know what line is, but don't cross it. And we have a note about breathing life into minor NPCs. That's good. We got some archetypes. These are, I guess, some kind of like pre-gens maybe, or templates you can use. So you can have an Arakeen native, an assassin, Bene Gesserit agent, Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother. Ooh, I like that. A criminal, or maybe these are kind of NPC templates. So So you just grab one, a courtier, an envoy, a face dancer. Ba, 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 ba. From an elder, from a warrior. Oh, my brother comes with many Fremen warriors. I tell you, there was nothing creepier, but I guess kind of funnier than what's her name? The sister. Oh, Alia, and in the Lynch movie where she's the Toto music's going and she's in the sand and she got the Chris knife and she's just kind of got this weird she's in some kind of battle ecstasy, but she's also 5 years old. And bow, 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 bow. Oh man, I think I made. Can I watch that movie tonight? Will my family allow me to watch that movie tonight? Probably not. Okay, house soldiers, mentats. Yes, love a good mentat. I love a bad mentat. I just like mentats. Saw Dakar. Don't seem that elite at the end of the day, do they? I mean, they're kind of the stormtroopers, right? They're set up to be these elites, but then they're kind of set up there for the Fremen to knock them down. Smugglers, spies, infiltrators, and there's some great on the Acoop blog. What is it? Oh shoot, what's that stand for? It's acoop.blog, and it's a collection of unmitigated pedantry. Really great stuff, kind of military history focused, but they go into sort of the myth, the myth that underpins both the Sardaukar and the Fremen, as that people who are born, this kind of idea of you're born in these terrible circumstances makes you a better kind of fighter, more it's a very pervasive myth. Good, great piece. I think it's not even one article. I think he writes a whole series of blog posts on it. Gamer says, well, the Fremen are the only ones who can stand up to the Sardaukar. I know the mythology, but they're the only ones that you see, so we don't get a sense. We don't ever get to see the Sardaukar really beat up on anybody. They don't even really beat up on the Atreides. They are able to kind of Pearl Harbor the Atreides, right? So that's kind of it's like they're set up like, oh, they're such badass warriors, but then you don't actually really get to see them do that, it reminds me a little bit of what's his name, Boba Fett. It's particularly in the original Star Wars, was like, oh, Boba Fett, you see him, he seems so cool, and he does kind of one cool thing, which is sneak after Han Solo, but then he doesn't really do anything else, and he ends up getting three stooged kind of into the Sarlacc, and then he's kind of done. And it's like, oh, Boba Fett's so cool. It's like, how is he so cool? Like, yeah, he looks kind of cool. What did he do? And then of course the tragedy of it was in the prequels. In the prequels, you get Jango Fett, and you're like, okay, now Lucas is gonna come back, and he is gonna show Jango Fett, and Jango is gonna do all the cool stuff that Boba Fett didn't get to do. And yeah, he goes down in a similarly comedic kind of fashion. Or no, Mace takes him out, but again, and didn't feel like a really good death either. So that's all I'm talking about. All right, so here we go. So now we get a yes, in the movie, or in the new movie. So of Evan Game, it says in the movie, a lot of 20 Atreides troops holds a stare against 3 times Harkonnen troops, and Sardaukar come and just wipe them. It's true, but don't the Sardaukar also drop in behind them? Isn't that thing of the Sardaukar kind of use their little floaty down? They kind of little floaty things, and kind of. I didn't feel like that demonstrated that the Sardaukar were super badass so much as that they got the drop on the Atreides. But I'm exaggerating a bit, but I feel like you can see my point at least somewhat, that there's not that moment, and a lot of times in a movie they'll set up like this guy is really like, whoa, he's really good, and then like, okay, and it just seems like they're more, you get it's more kind of talked about. But yeah, yes, I know that their background is that they're super tough, and the new movie does probably a better job of showing them a bit, but because they're constantly fighting the Fremen for the most part, and the Fremen are better than them, then they don't get to feel. I feel like I think like the Sardaukar to me are all right. So I'm not going to read the Harvesters of Dune. Let me know, you guys, let me know in the show notes, in the comments. No, you can't let me know in the show notes. Let me know in the comments or elsewhere if you want me to go through the sample adventure. I don't feel like it's necessary. I was just gonna say that I think oftentimes the Sardaukar kind of suffer the same problem that oftentimes fighters and things do, where like because or just that can happen to the party. Like something I like in an OSR type game is that you're your first level and you're struggling against goblins, and then you come back at fourth level and there's some goblins, and maybe there's more of them, so that becomes a different kind of challenge. But you feel that progression because you remember, like, oh man, I remember we used to run from 5 goblins and now we're slicing through them like butter, and now it's like there's 50 goblins and now we're not scared because the goblins are goblins and we're just better than that now, and you kind of get to feel that progression. What can happen in some games, I think, and I think modern D&D can be like this sometimes, and like other games can be like this, where your opposition is constantly scaling up to you, and so you never like this would happen in Elder Scrolls. I used to play. Oh man, not well. I played some Morrowind. What came after Morrowind? Oblivion. I played a ton of Oblivion, but it was kind of frustrating because your enemies would scale up. So you're fighting like first level, you're fighting first level goblins. But then it is, and I remember that there was a kind of a trick where if you didn't engage with a certain plot element, you could kind of hold off. You could hold off the scaling, but things would just kind of scale. So suddenly the goblins are always kind of a challenge because they're always scaling with you. And it's on the one hand, it's like, well, I get it because they want to make sure you're challenged. That's the fun of the game. But there's also another part. There's a different kind of fun, which is like, no, I should be kicking these goblins' butts now. They're not that tough. And the Sardaukar to me are kind of emblematic of that a little bit, where you never kind of get to see them kick butt the way maybe they're advertised as, because they just happen to be going up consistently against the people who just happen to be better than them. Oh no, Magnus, hope you feel better. House Atod's. Yeah, pretty much. Oh, and Avid Gamus, I guess, about that adventure. It's where they inspect a harvester and it's sabotage and gets eaten by a worm. Oh, cool. Well, maybe we'll read. Let me know if you want to read it. If you want me to read it on stream, folks. I think it's good to leave. Leave some things hanging, and I don't think it's going to. I'm not sure what it's going to tell us we are now, but I'll skip unless there's anything. I'm guessing. Oh, I'm guessing there's not. Are we at the end? We are at the end. Oh, you get some nice. What is that? That is a house record sheet, a character sheet. Looks like kind of a cheat sheet, some cheat sheets of stuff, and then the index. Awesome. And then you get some. What more can you get if you want? You can get a standard edition, you can get a collector's edition, you can get a player's journal, and you can get some. Oh, I like those dice. Those dice look nifty. Yeah, that's a nice color, yellow and blue. And what's that symbol? Is that a 1 or is that a 20? I want to say it's a 20, but I don't know. Custom dice, spot worm sign on these sand-colored dice to bring the power of the makers to your game. Yes! Bring me the makers! And they're coming, cleanse the world. All right. Well, Usul has called a big one. 5 parts. I gotta think that because I've gone over on just about all these streams, might be 5 parts, probably closer to 6 hours of Dune. Obviously, just to reiterate, I have not played or run Dune. I would like to. I absolutely would like to. I think they've done a good job. So let me thank. So I put on all these. It is just to kind of reset, kind of sit rep. The folks at Modiphius were kind enough to send this to me. I actually reached out to them. They did not reach out to me. I will mark it after this is over. I'll mark it as promotional just so. But really was I was interested in checking out Dune and the 2D20 system because I'd heard on might have been Jason's Nerd RPG Variety podcast, RPG Nerd Variety, whatever. I think that was the podcast. If you get Jason's Nerd RPG Variety, you probably find the podcast where they were talking about 2D20. I don't remember which episode it was, but there was one of the guests that was on it was very much a fan, knowledgeable in the ways of the 2D20. And they talked about how Dune was kind of, I'm obviously Dune is, I think, the newest one, so it's going to be the most refined, but they really thought it was kind of the peak of 2D20, at least for now. And from listening to that, I was intrigued. It's a little, and I'm at a spot where I'm like, I don't know if I can really afford to add this to the collection right now. So I kind of figured I reached out to Modiphius, said, hey, I'd really like to look at this and start kind of covering some of your stuff, kind of branch out. I'm really interested in Dune and the 2D20. Would you be willing to send me something so I can look at it on my channel? And they were super nice and said, sure. So that's how I got it. Full disclosure. They didn't ask me to do anything about it. I reached out to them. And of course, I'm streaming these live and I'm not reading it. And they don't know anything until I know it, and I don't know it until I've already said it. So it is, that's it. But then, just to give kind of full disclosure, since this is kind of the final end of the final part, I presume, unless I come back and read that adventure, just kind of reset. I'm digging the system. I'm digging the system. I like for Dune, a game like Dune, having the drives and those kind of traits, I think are good. I think that appeals. I mean, it appeals to me generally. It's one of the things that appealed to me about Pendragon. It appeals to me here. I think it to me it fits within the kind of ethos that you see in the books, in the movies, that people have these motivations and they act upon them, and they can either kind of help what they're trying to do or hinder what they're trying to do. The 2D system seems pretty clean. I like the way it seems to interact. I like the kind of inventory of all things. I think the unified mechanics feel good to me, at least in reading. Maybe in playing they turn into super clunky, but right now they seem really kind of work, and they're solid. I mean, the 2D20 system's been around for a while now, right? So they've got they're coming from a good base, a base that's used for a bunch of different games, which sometimes can not be bad, but sometimes you have a system that can be so generic and you're just kind of plopping it on. But I felt like a lot of this stuff feels very Dune. It feels like they're kind of working in the universe. It feels like there's a good job of them taking the mechanics and not just plopping the setting on top, but integrating different parts so that it really feels like you're doing Dune stuff with Dune characters in a Dune universe, which is, I think, it's kind of all you could ask. It's beautiful artwork. I think I caught one typo. There's probably, there's typos everywhere, right? But it's very well laid out. Seems very clearly written. I don't think I had too much trouble. I'd like to maybe read through that conflict session or section maybe a bit more with that dueling, just to kind of make sure I'm getting the full gist of it. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I mean, I can't swing it yet, but I would love to kind of do some where I could do like a one shot, get a couple of people together and run through that adventure, kind of do that. I know it's kind of on my, like, hey, if I have a rainy day and I could swing it. The channel's not the channel's not there yet to support me doing those kind of things so much yet, but I want to do it, and if I can find a way to do it, I will do it. But yeah, this definitely was a really fun read. Thanks again to Modiphius. Hopefully, it was useful to folks who sat through like avid gamers and made it through the whole 6 hour odyssey. But it was fun for me, and these streams really are helpful because I think if I just was reading it on my own, it would take me forever just because I got a lot going on. I have a gamer says, where could one look to participate in a potential one shot sometime? I mean, I've got a Discord. I've got I'll probably be like, I've got a Patreon. I think, I'm not sure how I would do it yet. If I would do it, I mean, if I was going to do it with just folks, I'd probably pull from Patreon because I have patrons who support me and suffer in silence, supporting me, and I'd want to probably reward them first. But I'm not sure what shape it would take. But if you wanted to stay kind of in the loop, the Discord, I have a Discord, I have a forum, I got the Patreon. They're all links are all in things. You can find me on social media. I will probably have to. I don't know. I have to figure it out. Figure out the parameters. Figure out what to do it, how to do it, when to do it, why to do it. So it's not something that's going to happen in the next time anyway. But I would like to do more of that stuff. I just got to kind of get. I got to reach some milestones to kind of give me the sort of freedom and whatever to do it. And like I said, I'm not there yet just in terms of the channel, but maybe we can make it happen. And I did that one shot with Daniel doing some OSE. I could probably get him or maybe a couple other people to do it, or maybe I'll throw it out to just folks in the community. I'm not sure yet. Let me know, right? You guys, if you guys are interested in whatever, let me know. But those are probably the main spots to, as well as YouTube, because I'm always doing stuff on YouTube. uh pay for the privilege of playing. I'm paying at my table, very patrician. It's more like people are already paying and I don't do anything. So it's kind of like, how can I help the people who are already helping me? I want to do more for the Patreon stuff, and as I'm slowly getting my act together with some of the materials, and I'm always trying to finish, that stuff tends to go to Patreon first. But folks, I'm just so appreciative of people who will shell out a couple of nickels uh, to help me do what I do. And other than putting out these videos and doing stuff, I don't do enough to pay them back. So I always try to think about, well, how can I pay some people back? Um, that's kind of where I come from. But if I, another thing would be like if I could make my way, because the part where I say like the channel can't support it is that if I could go to more cons and do some of that stuff, right? That would be another angle. It'll be like, ooh, I could go to a con and run it and maybe record it or maybe just do it live at a con. But I just can't get to many cons these days, right? So there's just a lot of limitations that I have right now. I have to work within, I got to work within my stuff. Anywho, I hear knocking at the door. So I guess that's time to go. Have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Everybody be good and game on. Talk to you later. Bye now.